Clive Barker, the horror mastermind behind the Hellraiser movies. Also the guy that made the infamous Jericho. However, he was also behind a lesser known classic named Undying. Clive Barker's Undying is a first-person shooter, published and developed by EA and designed by Barker himself. The game is a PC exclusive and was well received, but due to extremely poor sales, the ports and potential sequel were cancelled. Even support for a multiplayer patch in the future was cancelled. Here it is in all of its large boxed glory. On the inside, it says, "Their family secrets will scar you for life." Then it has a picture of the entire family, along with their possessed forms in the back. Then it has some screenshots, and a blurb, which I'll now read you on the back. It's a picture of a howler, which is one of the main enemies in the game. "Welcome a master of horror to PC gaming. Clive Barker's tale of unparalleled horror delivers hours of imaginative gameplay. Master of the occult, a tale of supernatural horror, and superior firepower." Has more screenshots on the back, and on the very bottom it says, "Live the horror or die trying." Inside of this beautiful box you'll get this registration card, which seems to be pretty standard because almost every single 90s big box game seems to have come with one of these bastards. This manual, which goes from everything on how to install it to all the items in the game that you're going to encounter and whatever. The game itself on a jewel case, which has the key on the back and all the default controls, which you can always change during the actual game. And then it has this disc. And then again it has "Their family secrets will scar you for life," with their regular versions over here and their possessed versions over here on the side, underneath the CD thing. And then last, it came with this really neat journal thing that goes through the diary entries of all 5 of the different siblings. It's a pretty cool read to pass time. It goes through everything that they had in their past before the game takes place. Yeah. Overall, I'd say it's a pretty neat item to have in your collection, mainly for this journal itself because it's so cool. But yeah. Undying revolves around Irish occultist and World War I veteran Patrick Galloway. His best friend Jeremiah Covenant had saved his life at one point during the war. In return, Patrick vowed to save his whenever in need. Jeremiah is the oldest of 5 siblings, with them being from eldest to youngest, twins Bethany and Aaron, Ambrose, Elizabeth, and Jeremiah. As children, the Covenants found a strange occult book in their father's library, and performed a ritual found within an ancient set of standing stones, located in an island on their family's extensive estate. However, what seemed like a game at first actually brought the wrath of evil forces upon the family. After reaching adulthood, the Covenants fell one by one into madness, and then eventually death, while leaving poor Jeremiah as the only survivor. The power of the curse turned his fallen siblings into evil entities, and have been haunting the man. In fear, thinking that he will end up the same way as them, is when Jeremiah contacts Patrick Galloway to help him however he can. The game starts off with Patrick reaching his estate in response to the letter he had sent him. Originally, the protagonist of the game was to be Count Mungus Wolfram, a tattooed man with superhuman strength and supernatural abilities. Barker himself rejected this idea, noting that the more normal, down-to-earth Patrick Galloway would be easier to relate to for the average gamer. Wolfram's character model still plays a small part in the finished product, however. He is the shaman who attacks the younger Galloway with the Shaman Stone in the opening cutscene flashback. The game runs on the well-known Unreal 1 engine, which was used to run other very popular games at the time, particularly Unreal or Unreal Tournament, of course, early Harry Potter games, Deus Ex, and a bunch of others. It wasn't anything super special back then, and it certainly isn't now in terms of graphics, but hey, it's not bad. There's definitely worse out there. It does make decent use of the engine to utilize its full potential. A lot of people today will get turned off by its PS2 style polygonal graphics, but if you refuse to play a game just because of its poor graphics, then you're better off not gaming at all. Now the game takes place in 1923, but will have you traveling through time to change events. Majority of the game will have you playing in a first-person perspective, besides some of the cutscenes that take place in a third-person perspective. This was probably the first game that lets you cast spells with one hand and hold a weapon in the other. I mean, System Shock had the Sai, but you had to switch between that and your other weapons. Undying, however, lets you simultaneously shoot your weapon while casting a spell. It's really useful and handy whenever you're reloading a weapon so that you can still cast attacks while doing so. Each of them are pretty damn unique. The player can collect these small amplifier stones that are usually hidden or in hard to reach areas. The amplifier stones can be activated to level up the player's spell of choice. You start the game with the Shaman Stone, which only pushes enemies away at first, but levels up every spell when it's in hand. Once you see Jeremiah, you'll pull out a revolver, which is pretty basic. After that, you get your hands on a dragon-shaped staff thing called the Typical War Cannon, which shoots out a burst of ice. The power depends if you hold the fire button down. The longer you hold it down, the more powerful the ice blast is. Then a Molotov cocktail, which we all know what it's used for. Shotgun, which can actually fire incendiary bullets. Scythe, which is what I personally use the majority of the game because it's badass. That can actually slice bodies in half and heads off enemies, which is pretty cool. Spear gun, which shoots out a large ass spear. It lets you zoom in so you can aim better when shooting it, and it acts like a sniper rifle for the most part. And last, you get the Phoenix eggs. This is pretty cool because whenever you toss them, a big phoenix flies out as you take control over it. Then whenever it hits an enemy, it just flat out annihilates them. The spells are one of my favorite things about this game. The first one, Scry, lets you see and hear things that normal humans can't, like alternate paintings, visions of the past, or hearing a really disturbing memory.
Damn you, Father. You will not tell me what to do.
My head! What are you doing?
I'm trying to set this family curse straight. If you cannot see that, then you don't deserve to live.
Ectoplasm lets you shoot out this acidic goo from your hands whenever the hell you want, and it's probably what you'll be using most of the time in the earlier levels. Dispel just takes down magical barriers. Invoke lets you bring back whatever the hell you killed and use them as an ally. Haste makes you jump, run, and shoot faster. Shield does exactly what it says it does. Skullstorm is probably my favorite, and it lets you summon and shoot these flaming explodable skulls. Lightning lets you shoot lightning out of your hand, and it's pretty cool for the most part, but I think the Skullstorm is far cooler. And this last one isn't necessarily a spell, but somewhere over halfway through the game you gain the ability to fly for a brief period of time. Your health is reset back to 100 at the start of a new area, or if you're low on health, you have to use the health packs that you find along the way. I thought it was really neat how they changed the textures and the names of the item to fit the environment. For example, in the mansion they're normal health packs. In the different realms, they're these tiny green glowing tubes called health vials. And on the island or whatever, they're called health roots, and look almost exactly identical to the Nali healing fruits on Unreal. All three of these appear as health in your inventory and can be activated at any time. Also, with that being said, instead of the normal effect, health doesn't heal the second you use the packs. You have to wait a good 5 to 10 seconds for the pack to take full effect, as it heals you over time. This is more challenging in combat-filled areas and can definitely let you die easier. You can pick up these two things in hard-to-reach areas called Arcane Rolls and Mana Wells. The Mana Wells increase the number of maximum mana you have, while the Arcane Rolls increase the speed it regenerates. You'll often collect little journal logs and they'll give you info, sometimes on what you're supposed to do, other times info on an item or weapon you just got, or usually a little backdrop of the story as to what the hell's going on and I've gotta say some of the entries in there are downright unsettling. While I've seen a lot of people complain about the game getting repetitive over time, I honestly didn't feel it was repetitive, but I can see why people would say that. I honestly thought the combat was satisfying enough throughout the game, but after you get all the spells, you're most likely going to use the same two over and over again. The atmosphere is nothing short of perfection. Older games always had such a nice atmosphere to them. It's kind of a shame how most modern games don't have as much detail to the atmosphere as old games do. And a lot of the times, the atmosphere is, in my opinion, what really grasps the player into the game and makes them feel more immersed. You can make a game as realistic or frightening as you want, but if you don't have a good atmosphere, it's not going to grasp you in as hard. With that being said, Barker did a phenomenal job designing the atmosphere, as he did in Hellraiser, though the two are completely different. There's so many neat little details that are crammed into this game, like bloody footprints, snowy footprints, floating curtains, creaking and slamming doors,
Locked.
the howler's loud howling, the way the enemies all sound like they want to tear your limbs from your torso. I could go on and on, but to give you the basic idea of what I'm trying to say, this game is bleeding with atmosphere. You can tell there's a strong Lovecraftian influence through the setting, and the enemies. And the way the estate and the ruins and whatnot are all designed is made to clearly give the player an unsettling feeling, and it gets the job done quite nicely. The environments are perfect. From the haunted mansion of the Covenants, to the hills, to a monastery, to an ancient version of the exact same monastery covered in snow, to dark, almost non-lit sewers. I love a lot of the environments in older games, but god damn, this is just spot on for a horror art fan's wet dream. Over the course of the game, you'll slowly start to lose the horror feel, or not feel as much unease like earlier. It's not that the atmosphere dies off, because it's honestly probably the best thing about this game, and still can't hold a candle to the atmosphere in today's games. But it's more the amount of power that you gain at the end, and it'll make you feel kinda overpowered. It can make most people feel either that it leads to repetition or to the loss of fear or dread. I can see this kind of level design throwing many new players off, confusing what to do or where to go. Though the game is pretty linear overall, and the doors that lead it the wrong way are always going to be locked or jammed.
Locked. Jammed.
Some of the game's puzzles are a bit confusing at times more than they need to be, but once you find out what it was that you're doing wrong, you're probably going to feel like a little dumbass. The footsteps can be heard pretty nice, changing sound depending on the type of surface you're walking on, which is actually really cool since they thought to put enough detail in the game to actually manage to do that. I remember some family friends had this game and played it when I was at their house, and I was probably about 7 or 8 at the time, hell if I know. I watched the oldest one play this a second after he installed it, and I was immediately blown away by how atmospheric this game was. Those howlers and the alternate paintings caught my attention more than they probably should have. Since then, I'd forgot the name of the game and was looking for literally years to manage to find it again. And when I finally did back in 2014, I fell in love with it all over again. When it comes to the enemies, their designs are all unsettling and really well done. The game starts by introducing you to these creatures called howlers, and they make a really neat howling sound when close by. Their name suits them perfectly, and while they might be a nuisance at times, they're personally my favorite enemy in the game, and I loved fighting them. There's a lot of enemies overall, probably more than most FPS games, so I'm just going to give you really quickly the name of the rest to save a good 10 minutes of describing them. There's monks, skeletons that don't die unless you use the invoke spell when they're down, rats, bats, scarrows, transits, abbots, plants, medusae, magicians, siliths, voragos, doomflyers, and cro-mags. It's kinda cool because each death is different based on the enemy, and it plays a little execution scene each time. All of the boss fights are Jeremiah's siblings. You have to kill them off one by one, youngest to oldest. While I thought Aaron's voice acting was kinda poor when he's in ghost form and made him seem like one of those ghosts from the Harry Potter games, I think everyone else does a phenomenal job doing their part. These people sound like they actually give a shit about what they're doing and emphasize their tone and voice perfectly spot on with how someone should sound during these certain situations.
Lisbeth, you have no idea what you've turned into. Why are you haunting your family so?
I know what I am. I seek vengeance. I was cheated by Jeremiah, and he will die to finish what was begun. You have awoken the past, but you don't know how to stop it. I will rend your bones and serve you to my pet.
On easy difficulty, the game is a literal cakewalk. Enemies take 1 to 2 hits average to kill, have very poor AI, and will take very small amounts of damage off your health. On normal difficulty, the game was more balanced while being a pretty decent challenge overall, but not something that feels cheap and unfair. Usually the deaths will feel like it's more because of a mistake you made rather than the game being a cheap. On Nightmare, which is the hard difficulty of this game, the game is goddamn ludicrous, but it's not impossible. The game has a few bugs here and there, but it's nothing terrible. The AI was pretty decent, but it, like most other games, has times when the enemies just blank out for a few seconds and then go the other way instead of towards you. It's not terrible, but considering Unreal had done a much better job with the AI and was made 2-3 years before, it's something to take note of. To tell you the truth, this is one of my all-time favorite games. It's up there easily in my top 10. Sure, there's bugs here and there and the levels can be too complex at times, and it can feel kind of repetitive to a lot of people by the near end. But this game has way more positives than negatives, and honestly there's nothing really wrong with this game for the most part. To be counting any of the bad things will be more nitpicking than anything. I highly recommend this game to any FPS fan, especially more old school gamers. The newer gamers should give this a try if you can grow a pair of balls and deal with the dated graphics, but go in it with an open mind that the level design is pretty fairly complex, and that it doesn't hold your hand very much. I don't really care so much for the planned ports because this is pretty good enough as it is on PC, but the cancelled sequel is just a real bummer. This is such a great game and I don't know why it sold so poor back in the day with a really high and positive reception. The sales were so bad that even a patch for multiplayer and fixed bugs was cancelled, which will always just make me scratch my head and wonder what the hell was going through people's heads back then.